morning and welcome to another live edition of Wealth Building Wednesday. Wealth Building Wednesday is brought to you by TRHT Selma. TRHT stands for Truth, Racial Healing, and Transformation. We are an initiative initially funded by the W.K. Kellogg Foundation, and we are a partnership between the Black Belt Community Foundation and the Selma Center for Nonviolence. Wealth Building Wednesday was introduced during COVID, but we have continued to broadcast and share information with you related to closing this thing called the wealth gap. For those of you all who are tuning into Wealth Building Wednesday for the very first time, the wealth gap is something that we talk about a lot because we have to. In America, we have a wealth gap between what Black families and what brown families and what white families have as far as assets versus liabilities. We want to level that playing field with Wealth Building Wednesday. So we put the information where the goats can get it so everybody can understand and so that we're able to move forward in progress so that we can open our own businesses, so that we feel free to dream, so that we are building a better, stronger community no matter where we are. And so today is just like every other episode of Wealth Building Wednesday. We are delighted to have a very special guest with us. Today we have Elizabeth Hollie, who serves as the managing attorney. She's the lead attorney for Legal Services Alabama, our Selma office. She is located right here in the historic city of Selma. Their office is downtown on Alabama Avenue. And you'll be able to access her. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to share. But I want to welcome Attorney Hollie. Welcome to Wealth Building Wednesday.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me here.
Absolutely. This is an extraordinary opportunity. So if you or someone you know has questions around landlord-tenant concerns, and we're also going to see if we can dip our toes off into talking about air property as well before we get out. We only do a 30-minute show, but we do try to pack a lot of information in. And like I said, Attorney Hollie is from Legal Services Alabama. So now for some of us, that may be a brand new organization. So I would love it if you could just simply tell us a little bit about yourself, but let us know what Legal Services Alabama does and what it is, why it was founded, and what services you provide.
Legal Service is a nonprofit law firm here in Alabama that represents low-income individuals in civil matters. We don't handle any criminal cases, but we have offices that cover the entire state of Alabama, offices spread out throughout Alabama. We are the only nonprofit law firm that covers all of Alabama at no cost to our clients. The type of matters that we handle are, like you said, consumer cases, debt collection cases, garnishments, repossessions, mortgage foreclosures, housing issues in terms of landlord tenant issues, repairs. We have disaster relief going on currently because of the storm. We also handle public benefits such as someone's SSI stopping or Medicaid, food stamp issues as well, education practice, and elder law practice. I've been at Legal Services since 2017 is when I first came here. So I've been handling it ever since.
Awesome. Okay. So now that means that you have a lot of experience. So like I said, if you have questions, now is the time to ask. And we're also going to share information on how to get in touch with the folks at Legal Services, because Attorney Hollie, she's the lead attorney, but she's not the only attorney. And as she stated, they cover the entire state of Alabama. I know that if you want to know more or you want to see if you can make an appointment, you can log on to their website. That is legalservicesalabama.org. So quite a robust website. I have visited myself. And so you can learn a lot about the organization as well as what they do. And you can also set appointments through the website. So now, why would you say, because you mentioned a lot of things, particularly around consumer law, that you all assist and advocate. Why are you all such a vital part of any community that you're in?
Well, for one thing, there are a lot of individuals who cannot afford to pay an attorney to represent them in different cases. And then there are a lot of cases that private attorneys won't take because it doesn't give them a fee or anything like that. Let's say debt collection cases. A private attorney may not take a debt collection case because, they may think that if the client cannot pay their debt, how are they going to pay me?
Mm.
There may be some private attorneys, which there are, that we work with that handle those types of cases on a pro bono basis, meaning at no charge. But there's not, legal services is the stable law firm that handles it at no cost to our client. And it's something that we relish and we cherish, helping individuals who can't help themselves. So for those, I guess the least of these who cannot afford it, that's what legal services is for.
Now, I love that. And you said the least of these, because when we don't do right by folks,
Mhm.
it makes it harder for everybody. People talk
Right,
about you want all of the ships to rise. And so a part of doing that is to make sure the folks who have the least are
right,
covered. So
correct.
now, what are some of the most common? I know you listed a lot of areas that you all cover, but what are some of the most common needs for legal support that you've seen in your experience with legal services?
Well, of course, since the pandemic, our housing cases has increased exponentially.
Mm.
We're dealing now more with evictions when the emergency rental assistance was in place, which they're ending, um, I think the end of April.
Mm-hmm.
That was a benefit where legal services partnered with ERA Alabama to expedite those cases that were in court to get the payment made to the landlord. The
Mm.
housing issue is one of the biggest ones that we're seeing right now. Debt collection used to be greater, I think, like in 2017, 18, and 19. But since the pandemic, it's been mostly the housing cases and those things that come around that. If we have, let's say, a mother with children who's being evicted and they have to move somewhere else, that brings about an education issue for the children.
Right.
Most people don't understand that if you are considered homeless by the McKinney-Vento Act, the child can still go to the same school they were in before, even if you move.
Mm-hmm.
So it just one thing leads to another legal issue. Housing, debt collections, and now garnishments are on the rise as well.
Oh, wow. Okay. So now housing. And
Mhm.
before we went live, we were talking about this issue of housing,
Right,
because it's on the tip of everybody's tongue at this point. Since the storm occurred, the tornado occurred in Selma and across the Black Belt, folks have been facing terrible situations when it comes to stable housing.
correct.
Selma, in particular, has not really had the best housing market. But now we definitely are facing some challenges, especially when it comes to rental property and
Right.
places that are available. So now, want to talk a lot about housing
Okay.
and the rights that people may have. So, what rights do tenants have? I know that you just mentioned folks being evicted after the storm and potentially being evicted in April as a result of the subsidies not being available anymore. So, what rights do tenants actually have?
The Alabama has put in place what's called the Uniform Residential Landlord Tenant Act
Hmm.
that states what rights, what responsibilities the landlord has, and what responsibilities the tenant has, and what remedies they have if those, enacted laws are not followed. There's also the rights that's in the lease. As long as the lease does not contradict what the statute states, um, in most cases, then it's governed as well. The landlord must provide the access to the residence, of course. Once you pay your rent or sign a lease, they must give you access immediately, meaning you move in. The tenant also has a responsibility to keep up the premises and not damage it. The necessity needs to be provided. Water, if it's within the lease, they can't turn off the water just to get you out. And the tenant can't purposely damage certain things like, let's say, put holes in the walls or anything.
Hmm.
So it's the upkeep of it that's responsibility of the tenants, and the landlords has responsibility to maintain the common areas. If, let's say, an apartment complex, maintain the common areas. If it's a house, then whatever's agreed to in the lease must be abided by. So go to your lease first to see what's in there. I would tell everyone, read your lease entirely before you sign it, because you need to know what you're signing. And even if you're signing electronically, because I think that's some of the options now,
Hmm.
take the time to read it. You can scroll back to it and read it before you sign each portion. If it's not something that you're going to agree to and you're not going to abide by, then don't sign the lease. So,
Now, that's some great advice when it comes to any legal document.
mhm,
As an attorney, you know that folks want to argue about a whole lot of things. Look,
I agree.
but if we first check into it, like actually read through those documents before we sign on, a friend of mine made a terrible financial decision in taking out getting some money. It was
Right,
easy, right? But didn't pay attention to the interest. I was like, that is beyond credit card. What are you doing?
right,
I didn't see it at the time. I said, okay, so we're gonna have to try to go back and fix this thing.
right.
But it's important to definitely make sure that you're checking your lease, folks. Make
Mhm.
sure that you are within the confines of what is being stated, because if your signature is on it, wouldn't it make it harder for me, like if I'm a tenant, wouldn't it make it harder for me to get out of whatever it is I'm being required to do if I've signed on to that lease?
It would be harder if the landlord is following all the rules as well.
Okay.
If the landlord, one thing about court, you have to go in with clean hands. Like, you can't go sue somebody if you've done something wrong too. That
Okay.
happens. And it just takes someone, such as attorneys with legal services and other attorneys, to bring out, okay, this landlord is trying to evict me, but they turned off the water, or they didn't do what they were supposed to do. You have to have clean hands. It would make it a little bit harder, but it's not impossible. It just
Okay.
depends on the situation. Repairs, the law allows, if there are material repairs that are not made, then you can, as long as you send the landlord a 15-day letter,
Hmm.
telling them, give them 15 days to fix the problems. If they don't, you have the option of leaving. If it's something that's material, like let's say the heat doesn't work
Hmm.
and the landlord's responsible for fixing that, you can leave. The problem is, like you said in Selma, where are they going to go? Because even with the storm destroying a lot of houses, it's a lot less availability now.
Hmm.
It's kind of, something that you need to think about as well. Do you want to give the landlord a little bit more time to fix the problem if they're willing to? If not, um, the final step may be you suing the landlord for diminution of property, the value of the property.
So now, if I'm a tenant, can I withhold my rent because something is not being paid? I mean, being repaired.
Absolutely not.
Okay.
It used to be years ago that was done.
Hmm.
In 2000, and I believe it was 2006 or 16. I'm not sure I can't remember which year. The laws were changed so that the tenant cannot withhold their rent because the landlord refused to make a repair. If they are withholding their rent, they have to put it someplace, let's say in an account, and not touch it, showing good faith.
Okay.
Um, you know what I mean? Showing good faith that, you have intentions of paying your rent, but you should not withhold your rent. The option is to give the landlord something in writing stating what the problem is, give them 15 days to fix it. And if you choose to break your lease, then you can send a letter to that you're going to vacate the premises.
Okay. So now what about and I'm asking all of these questions because I've run into over the years run into folks asking questions just like this, and I'm like, I don't know. Like
Right. I can
so
understand.
right. So when say if I'm a tenant and I'm not going to withhold rent, but if I make the repair on my own, am I then allowed to deduct the amount of the repair or the materials or what have you from the amount of rent?
Let's say if after you did done the 15-day letter and the landlord did not do it,
Mhm.
it's possible that you could withhold that money. You just
Okay.
have to make sure you put it in writing. I paid this, provide the receipt. It can't be something, if you hire someone, you need to get an invoice from them
Okay.
showing that it was something, showing what the quote is and showing that it was paid, proof, and then providing that to the landlord when you provide your rent.
Okay. So what if I did it just on my own? You know, the hot water heater is busted. I didn't give the 15-day letter. Can I then let's say replace the hot water heater and just have the receipt and let the landlord know, hey, I replaced this.
That's not recommended.
Okay.
The reason being
Mhm.
is, you're helping the landlord. When you leave, that water heater is still going to be there for
Mhm.
someone else to use. You're
Mhm.
improving his property. Um, I think I would rather, it would be best if you allow the landlord to do something that major. But
Okay.
that's something that you could possibly do, because you're replacing something and you're improving his thing. But think about it, you're losing out in the end because you can't take that water heater with you,
Now,
especially if
now
you're
I do want to
without.
ask that question. What about when tenants choose to make improvements, right? We're going to call them improvements and say do things like replace ceiling fans, replace flooring, I want to paint the walls. What are the rules around that?
A ceiling fan, it becomes part of the structure. You can't take that with you then. It's even though, it's kind of removable, it still becomes part of that housing structure, and it's now the landlord's. Unless when you leave, you put back the old ceiling fan that you replaced.
Right.
Because you can't just take it and not put something back if there was something there in its place, if that makes sense. Painting is not really, that's kind of an aesthetic issue.
Hmm.
Most leases said you can't make any painting changes to it unless it's agreed to by the parties. So check with your landlord before you paint something. Um, and if the landlord says it's okay, get it in writing. Make
Ah,
that way you can say, you agreed to this, because dispute word for word. Oh, well, I told him he couldn't. Well, you told me you could, is on, the judge or wherever, if you're in court, to determine who's being more truthful or who is telling the truth. Other things, if it's attached to the property, it
mhm.
becomes part of that structure.
So what about from the landlord's perspective,
Mhm.
right? Or the person or the property owner, because
Right.
landlord can be such a hmm,
I know it's kind of a strange term, but property owner, I think, is a better
right.
term on some
Right.
referring to
So
property.
from the property owner perspective, are there recommendations that you would have for property owners, those folks who may be already leasing or thinking about leasing a property that they own to someone else to live in, that can help them avoid having to go to court for any reason?
Right. I would say you need to know what the landlord tenant rules are,
Okay.
in terms of what you can do, what you can't do, what the tenant's supposed to do, what the tenant cannot do.
Okay.
And it's not, may not want to have an attorney on the payroll. It's good to go and consult with the attorney to find out what you can do. If it's kind of hard to understand what the law is, um, the landlord tenant law is, because it changes sometimes.
Mhm.
If you're not, let's say if you're not an attorney being a landlord, it's hard to
Mm.
understand. And sometimes for us, it takes us doing a little bit of research as well to find what cases to help us understand as well. But I say consult with an attorney. A consultation shouldn't cost you that much. Know what your rights are. Know what you can and cannot do. And I say the same thing for tenants. Know what you can and cannot do. Legal services is here for tenants who qualify for our services at no charge. But landlords, we can't advise them. Like, they come to us, we can't advise a landlord on what to do, because we represent the least of these, which are the tenants who possibly cannot afford an attorney to help them.
So now, do you all do any special clinics or workshops that would allow folks to learn more about the law and, as a tenant, what your rights are? Do you all host any events like that?
We do. We have in the past hosted a combination of landlord and tenant legal clinics virtually, so that anyone can attend. I don't know when the next one is.
Okay.
I can reach out to our director to find out if there's anything coming down the pipeline for, so the landlords can learn and tenants can learn. Like, landlords can, be on this live right here and learn some things as well.
Yes.
We do have clinics throughout. Tomorrow, actually today, we have a clinic, an air property clinic in Uniontown at City Hall that starts at 6:00 p.m. tonight. So we'll be talking about air property, and the insurance things that problems that's coming with the disaster. We have, I think the best way to find out where we're having legal clinics is to follow our legal services page because we post there on all of our social media. We have a Facebook page, we have an Instagram account, and a Twitter account, as well as going to our website. And usually, when we partner with people like we're partnering with you, go to whoever the partner is, their website, follow them, so that you can know when events is going on. But we have legal clinics quite often throughout Alabama, not just in the Selma office,
Yes.
trying to reach as many as we can.
Awesome. So I just want to reiterate to folks that as you're watching, if you want to tap into all of the great programming that is available through legal services, follow them on their social media platforms. You can also visit their website. Again, that is legalservicesalabama.org to learn more about who they are, what they do, and how they can help you and your neighbors. This is an awesome opportunity for us. And thank you, Legal Services Alabama, for letting us know that you can reach the LSA call center at 1-866-456-4995. And again, you can reach them online at legalservicesalabama.org. We're super excited to have attorney Elizabeth Hollie. She serves as the managing attorney for the Selma Legal Services office. And we are delighted that folks are tapping in and trying to find out more information about this thing, the housing issues in particular. And I know that you just mentioned that you all will be doing a clinic on air property. Mm-hmm. So let's talk about air property. We only have a few more minutes left. What in the world is this thing that people refer to as air property? And it's not AIR, y'all. It's not property in the air.
Right. It's air, like you're inheriting something. HEIR. It's property that you inherit from someone who died. Let's say a parent had property when they passed away. It passed to the children. If they didn't have a will, then it passes, to the heirs. Of the problem with air property, which we're seeing more of now, is with the storm. FEMA requires that the person show ownership of the property they're trying to get FEMA funds for. There are some people who did not change the name to whoever the new owner is. We're having to go through the probate office to probate the estate of the deceased person who may have died years ago. So that's a problem. It's because people don't automatically change things the way they're supposed to do when the person passes away.
So now for a situation, and I can imagine that this is happening a lot, particularly in communities where there's a high concentration, let's be clear, of Black folks and Black folks who are living at or below the poverty level.
Correct.
Air property was something I think that a lot of our folks thought was a great thing. Right. I know my grandparents just thought it was just the best thing since sliced bread. And now my family is having to deal with, who do we assign different things to, because we're all heirs. Like, right? So in a situation, right, like based on the storm damage and what we're seeing happening in our neighborhoods, particularly around like the 6th ward, 5th ward was impacted pretty harshly as well. How do we navigate that situation? So is it just simply going through probate court, or like is there a way to untie all the ties or the tentacles that may be attached to a piece of property?
Right. Actually, not all situations require going through probate. Okay. Let's say there are 3 siblings. Only one has been living there. The other 2 siblings have their own home. And they say, well, my brother has been living there. I just want to give him my portion of it. They can do what's called a quit claim deed to quit claim their property, their right to that property, to this one sibling who's been living there. We've had that situation happen and was able to do that successfully. And then they just go and change that to with the tax assessor's office and then file that in with the records office.
Okay.
And then that person who's been living there get it changed to their name. Probate is a little bit more different when it comes to, let's say, three siblings. One child had passed, and that child had children. So those children comes up in that, the
Mm-hmm.
two siblings place. It gets a little bit more diluted then, because now you have the children who may think, okay, I'm giving up what used to be my father's or my mother's. I don't want to do that. I want my portion out of it. I want it sold, blah, blah, blah. You may have to go to probate in the estate. It has to go in everyone's name. The deed has to be in everyone's name who are owners. Um, the person who wants the property can choose to um, buy out the other owners for whatever price they set, if it's reasonable, to gain that as well. But the longer that people wait to do air property the correct way,
Mm-hmm.
the more diluted it will become, because as people pass away, their children comes into it, especially if there's not a will.
Okay.
Their children comes into it and keep going. Therefore, sometimes I've been in cases where there are hundreds of heirs because there was never a will. Right, it happens more often than you think. um,
Wow.
so now this one heir wants everything divided. They don't want their name on it. They want it partitioned. It could be 1 acre. You have to partition it into 100 different pieces that way.
So what are you going to do with 1/100th of an acre?
I don't know.
You can-
Well, you're 1/100th of an acre to the person who wants it. But the value, you have to bring in surveys, appraisers, to determine the value. Who's going to divide it up? It has to be divided, which means it has to be a survey. So don't wait to do air property. Do a will is
Mm.
so that you can tell where you want your portion to go to. If you want to go to whoever has the most, whoever living there, do a will.
So now, and I want to ask you about wills and trusts because now I know that you all are largely consumer law, but
Mhm.
would wills and trusts be considered a part of what you all are able to do, or what do you recommend for people who need to establish a living will or trust for their family?
We do handle those as well. We handle living wills, power of attorneys, and actual, last will and testament. We have, I think, almost every office has an elder attorney. The Selma office
Okay.
does has an elder attorney, which handles those type of issues for someone 60 and above, and no charge. Not all of our services are free. I don't think I mentioned that. All of our services are free. So they can contact us to get a will done. We are doing wills clinics as well.
Awesome. And I've seen those. I want to quickly ask because our time is almost up.
Mhm.
There was is this loophole or a law that allows, I'll say, because I'm not going to call, I shouldn't call it a loophole, that if an elder is preparing to move into maybe like an assisted living facility
Mhm.
or something like that, that they can actually use any property they own to establish some sort of. I've heard that there's some funny, like I've heard of old, like people who are aging, going ahead and
Mhm.
transferring all of their property, like to their children or grandchildren,
Right.
so that it's not, I guess, counted as income. Is there any truth to that?
Well, here's the thing. If they're talking about, like, let's say Medicaid or Medicare paying for the the facility that they're going into, is that
Uh
what you
huh.
mean?
Okay.
Okay, they have a look back period of about 5 years to see if you've transferred any property.
Okay.
You cannot get rid of property just so that you can qualify for governmental assistance. They
Okay.
look at that, and then if it's within a 5 year period, they use some kind of formula. I don't know what the formula is to determine what the value of the property is. First, they have to determine whether or not you did that just so you can qualify. Then there's a penalty in terms of how long you are disqualified from. You're ineligible from receiving the governmental assistance. I don't know what the time period is. Something that they use. Um, but there have been people who've done that and say, okay, I want my child to have it. Um, a disabled child, they can transfer that to a child who is disabled, need a place to stay.
Okay.
um, for a period of time, but you cannot just get rid of property just that you can qualify for Medicaid and Medicare. There's a
Okay.
5-year look back period, unless they changed it. But the last I remember, it was a 5-year look back period.
Okay. So I'm so glad that you talked about that 5 year look back period, because we, as you mentioned earlier, to make sure when we were talking about property owners and tenants with leases and making sure that you're reading, y'all, we have to make sure that we're reading documents, even
Right.
when it comes to, or especially when it comes to the government, right? Because you've got to think about the fact that these are folks that hold those 9 digits that
Right.
identify who we are. And so when we're falsifying information in order to try to qualify for a benefit, and then there are these look back periods, that are even connected to things like the PPP loans, right? There are look back
Right.
periods that are connected to those things. So we have to be very, very careful with what we are signing, and especially those things that are connected to our social security number. So I know that we are well past our time. This has been extraordinarily helpful information. If you are looking for information on air property, tonight, starting at 6 o'clock in Uniontown, Alabama, Legal Services Alabama will be on hand providing information about air property. The advice that Attorney Hollie just gave us is get your business in order. Okay, so we need to work with Legal Services Alabama to access their attorneys and get living wills in place. If you would like to reach out to Legal Services Alabama, you can give them a call at 1-866. This is toll free, 866-456-4995. Okay. And so this is a great way for you to learn more about the services they offer. You can set up an appointment with them. You can also visit their website, which is www.legalservicesalabama.org. If you speak Spanish, hablas español, dial 1-888-835-3505. Again, that number for our Spanish speaking brothers and sisters is 1-888-835-3505. These are important resources, y'all, that we now have access to. We've had legal services for a long time, but I guarantee you it's somebody who just found out
Right.
about Legal Services Alabama. So we want to thank you, Attorney Hollie, for being with us. We're definitely going to have you back.
I'll be happy to come back. Thank you for having us on here.
Absolutely. You all have partnered with us in so many ways. Every year when we host the Freedom Fest, you all are there. You all have done expungement clinics with us, and restoration of voting rights. We're excited to always welcome you to the Wellness Village with the Bridge Crossing Jubilee. So we're glad to now have you on Wealth Building Wednesday, and just want to encourage everyone who was watching today. If you missed anything, you can click that rewind button, or if you know someone to whom this information would be extraordinarily relevant, please make sure you share this video. We are live on Facebook right now, but we also broadcast to YouTube on the Black Belt Community Foundation, as well as Selma Center for Nonviolence Facebook and YouTube channel. So we're excited to send you to legalservicesalabama.org for your best information on resources available. They are advocates who service for free the least of these. I love that. I love that. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Awesome. And see y'all next Wednesday for another episode of Wealth Building Wednesday.